Ladies and gentlemen, the 5 Series is pretty much how I remember it. I'm really excited today because I will be driving a car that I've been looking forward to for a long time. Ladies and gentlemen, let me present to you the new BMW 5 Series. Why am I excited? Because I believe the 5 Series is the right mix of a car that you would like to drive and wouldn't mind being driven in. Is that the case with the new model as well? Well, that's what we're going to find out. But before we begin, well, I would request you to consider subscribing to the autoX YouTube channel. It really makes our day and means a lot to us. As you can see, a lot of you people actually do watch our videos but are not subscribing. Please do that. I know subscribing is not the trend these days, but do it. It really means a lot to everyone who's working together to bring this film to you. Having said that, let's get to the 5 Series design. Now, of course, this is a new BMW, so we have to start with the design of the car. And the first thing that I noticed when I saw this car was the sheer size of it. You see, Karan Mathur, our colleague, you would have seen him in other YouTube videos. He was quick to grab the keys and bring it from the BMW office to our office. And the first time I laid my eyes on the car was just how big this is. It almost feels like a 6 GT. I'm not sure if I'm correct on this, I'll have to check the numbers, but I think this is pretty much as big as one of the older 7 Series, and I'm talking about just the previous generation or something like that. That's how big this car has become in person. Now, let's take a closer look at one of the design elements that is perhaps the most talked about amongst BMW fanboys, which is the grille. Now, it is somewhere in between of the size that BMW purists like and the i7. So thankfully, it's not as humongous as that, but it's still a sizable unit. This time around, you will have lights around the grille as well, just like we saw on the i7. And that's pretty much a theme with the car, as you will see in this video, that a lot of those elements from the i7 has been borrowed down to the 5 Series. So yes, that's the grille. It also has these flaps over here, which open up to better help with ventilation with all the systems underneath the skin. The other thing to note is this element right here. In our test car, this is brushed aluminum finish. You can also get the 5 Series with a golden or bronze or whatever color you want to call it, that kind of an accent, and that will change the color options that you get with the car. So keep that in mind. If you want the silver accents, there are some color options you can go for because that's how BMW is offering it. But if you want them in bronze, if that is per your taste, you will have some different color options. So remember, wherever you see these silver finishes around the car as I walk you through it, you can opt for bronze options as well. Other than that, you still get a sporty bumper, as you can see, and we have to talk about the lights. Now, I really like how they've sort of gone back to the older 5 Series where the lights would just point up, if you know what I mean. That's the kind of a look that has come back again. But what's different is the DRL signature. Gone are those circular elements, and now it's all vertical. And that's pretty much the theme of the front end design of the car. As you can see, vertical elements in the grille, vertical elements in the LED signature, and all of that gives it a bit of an SUV vibe. I mean, I think it's been done to give it that taller stance, but that's where we are at. Coming to the side profile, again, you can see the long bonnet, but what's different is that the overhangs are a lot more bigger. And when you couple the growth in size that the car has seen, the growth in height that it has got, the larger overhangs, well, this really does stick out like a sore point, doesn't it? I have to say I'm not a fan. These are actually 18-inch wheels, but because of the car, it feels like 16. That's just how big the car has got. Now, this is a double-sided sword. I mean, it doesn't look as pretty, but because now with the 18-inch wheel options, you get these larger profile sidewalls, and that aids in driving comfort. That we'll get to in a bit. Remember, you can opt for 19-inch wheels, which come with lower profile tires, and that looks good, better, if I may say so. The wheel arch gap, though, well, that's there to stay. Again, silver elements across the windows. This too will be in bronze if you opt for. But overall, the profile gives that stately feel that owners of the 5 Series will like. And speaking of 5, you have that written over here on the C pillar as well. Two things I want to mention about this element. First, the Hofmeister kink, really smoothened out. I don't know if I'm a fan of that not being as dynamic as it used to be. And the other thing, the 5 that you see here, well, that glows up if you were to buy this car in China. And that's the second thing about the car. You see, the long wheelbase model of the 5 Series only comes in China up until now, because India is the second market to get that model. And that is the only variant that you will be getting over here in the Indian market. In China though, this 5 glows up, not in India, because BMW says there is a draft regulation in place which prohibits cars sold in India to have an element that lights up on the side profile of the vehicle above a certain height, and this would not meet that requirement. So to just be safe, it does not light up if you were to buy it over here. Now let's come on to the back. It's a really hot day right now, but the back end of the car, well, not so hot, I would say. To me at least, it does not really speak to the front end design of the car, which is a lot of vertical stuff going on. But here at the back, everything feels horizontal. Of course, you get these new slimmer lights. These are in line with the new design language that the new BMW cars will get, which have these slimmer lines, slight L shape, but as slight as it can get. Down here at the bottom, you have this diffuser-like element, again with silver finishes, which would be bronze if you were to choose the bronze option for your car. All in all, I think the car's grown really bigger. And one thing that you would see if I were to show it to you from this angle is just how coupe-like design it has got here at the back as well. So yes, a lot of changes on the BMW 5 Series, a lot bigger than before. We've taken you through it in depth. Now it's time to step inside. Now coming to the inside, well, the theme of things being borrowed from the new 7 Series continue, and that is why we have a cabin that looks quite familiar to it, and that's not a bad thing at all. What's different though, however, is because the car is not as wide as the new 7 Series, everything just feels more snugly put together, more closer towards the driver, and that can also be said about the screens, which are clearly angled toward the driver, and it's not a bad thing whatsoever. The fit and finish, the way everything has been put together, the quality of materials used, everything is absolutely top notch. I think BMW have outdone themselves with just how well this car has been put together. Taking a closer look, what really stands out is this crystalline like lighting element that runs across the dash and here on towards the door, and that goes all the way to the back as well, as we'll show you later. So this lighting element pretty much wraps around you throughout the entire cabin. In the 7 Series, it's a continuous strip of light, but in the 5 Series, it sort of breaks down over here as the infotainment system is slightly lower over here. But that is really nitpicking at this point because the lights are fantastic. These are one of the best lights I've seen in a cabin in this segment. So if you're into lights, if you like putting lights in your cabin, I don't think this is what you'll be doing with this car because these are just so good. They also double up with different functions. So for example, if I were to start the hazard lights, you can see all of it blinks red. So very creatively used by BMW. I really like this element. Now let's talk about other things like the center console over here. Again, familiar, it has this crystalline like dial over here, which lets you control the elements on the screen. Of course, you've got the gear selector knob, also in that diamond-like finish. You've got a couple of cup holders and a wireless charging tray up here in the front. But there is something peculiar, and you only realize it maybe when you're asked about it, which is, where are the AC vents? Yes, the cabin does not have any clearly visible AC vents because in the cabin, these are seam type vents. So they are sort of hidden out of the way. But in our humid conditions, like how we are in Delhi, there is a bit of condensation that builds up on the dash. So you sort of know where the wind is coming from, but it's very cleverly hidden. and it is not immediately visible and gives the dash a very modern look. I really like how this wooden type element has been put onto the dash. Do remember this changes as per the accent color that you choose with the car. So if this was a car with the bronze highlights, this panel would have been slightly different, but this is what you get with the silver one. Now let's talk about screens. 14.9 inches infotainment system and 12.3 inches digital instrument cluster. Two large screens housed in this one continuous panel with gloss black things in between. Give it the impression that this is one huge screen right in front of you. The display quality, amazing. Graphics are smooth. There's no lag whatsoever. Crisp display. There is nothing to complain about the display quality at all. The good thing is there are a lot of customization options available too, and that's not only just in colors. You can actually change the themes of the dash per se, depending on, say, whatever driving modes you choose. Speaking of which, you now have this button here called My Modes, which lets you choose from sport, efficient, expressive, relaxed, personal, digital art, silent. There's a lot of things going on. So for example, if I were to select the sport mode, everything becomes a bit more red and my display in the instrument cluster changes too. If I were to go to efficient, then everything is calm and blue and gives that vibe of a relaxed car. So a lot of themes going on over there. The steering wheel, again, really chunky steering wheel. It's got that M wheel with really nice definition all around it. I really like this. Gives it that chunky feel, gives you that sporty feeling. All in all, the cabin out here in the front leaves no stone unturned. One of the things I'm not a big fan of is that almost every interface on the dash and almost all the buttons on the center console are all touch based. I mean, you really have to take your eyes off of what you're doing in order to make sure you get the correct hit on the button on the dash, and that is something that could take some time getting used to. Coming to the rear seat of the 5 Series, this of course is the long wheelbase model, and almost all of that increment in the length of the car shows up here. Now, the 5 Series was never a car that didn't have enough space for the rear passengers, but with the new 5 Series long wheelbase, there is loads of knee room. I mean, it really does feel like I'm seated in a 7 Series. There's a lot of space, as you can see. Now, for reference, I'm 5'10". I've set the driver's seat as per my height, and I've set this to match the driver's seat to give you an idea of how much space you would have if you were seated behind me. Now, remember, this is the boss seat. This is where the boss sits. So that's why I decided to sit this side to give you an idea of space. I can comfortably slide my feet under and I can really relax here. That's just how good it is. Now, in terms of seating capacity, you can have a third person sitting here in the middle. There's a big transmission tunnel. They'll be a little bit uncomfortable. This part protrudes a bit, but you do get a third headrest over here that pops out and can be used for the third passenger. But when you're not having a middle passenger, you can drop this down. A very nice, well-sized armrest. And this also has a wireless charging pad, which I think is a great touch. This also has cup holders. And where do they come out from? Well, like this. All of it shifts ahead and you get access to cup holders. You can obviously slide them away too. So really nice attention to detail. The HVAC controls at the back. Now remember, this car does get 4-zone climate control, so all zones of the car can have their own temperature settings. That is done through touch. And one button over here opens up this panoramic sunroof. Now, this does not open, it's not openable, but the size of it is massive. It lets a lot of light inside the cabin. I did drive it while it was raining, and that looked fantastic. This is a really nice touch, adds to the sense of space. You can, of course, close the blind with a touch of a button as well. What you can't do with a touch of a button, though, is you can't adjust the front passenger seat, and I think that's a bit of a miss. Interestingly, though, even your chauffeur won't be able to do that from their side of the car, from their cabin, and neither can they do that from the screen, so they really have to scoot over to do that. Just something you should know, not a deal breaker, of course, but when you do push the seat ahead, A lot of space will be opened. This will feel like a proper limousine. Now, let's talk about comfort. Well, these have really big seats. I was speaking to BMW. I asked, where is the increase in width going? They said all of that has been put to this large bolstering on the sides. The seats almost curve inwards, so it really feels like the seat is hugging you. Now, the India model gets larger seats because it's a long wheelbase model, and all of that space has been put to good use because the seat is really comfortable. What I also like is this intricately designed mesh over the speakers over here at the back. Now, this is a Bowers and Wilkins music system. Lots of speakers, lots of watts. It sounds fantastic. The in-car experience is really nice. But what is lacking though, surprisingly, is that there are no screens over here. You do get a USB-C port, a slot to hang your iPad if you want to, but that's about it. Now, I do have to mention one thing that's a bit of a surprising omission from the new 5 Series, which is that you don't get a sun blind over here, and you don't get it for the rear glass panel either. Interestingly, the older 5 Series used to get both of that. It even had a cover over the quarter glass, but the new 5 Series, for some reason, does not get it. Now, speaking of things it doesn't get, there is no roll-down TV over here. Now, what am I talking about? What is Manav saying? Is he being greedy? No, not really. The China model, the long wheelbase model, comes with a drop-down TV, the 31 point some inch 8K resolution monitor that drops down, which we have seen in the 7 Series. But in India, that is not offered. I think BMW wants to keep it for the 7 Series customers. Right, all of that is done. What's left to talk about is the boot space, which is now 500 liters of capacity. As you can see, there's a lot of space over there, but it's rather shallow, so keep that in mind. With that, everything covered, let's go for a drive. Now we start off our driving experience of the 5 Series from here at the back. And I have to say, right away, it is a very comfortable place to be in. No complaints whatsoever, really. The best thing has to be the amount of sound insulation that's happening inside the cabin. I mean, I can almost whisper. That's just how quiet it is. But when I do turn on that music system, the whole experience becomes so much more engaging and so much more intuitive. It's just a really nice experience to be here in the back seat of the 5 Series. Now, one thing I do want to mention though, remember how we mentioned during our in-cabin look that the front passenger seat cannot be adjusted from here at the back and the driver really has to scoot over? Here's the thing. Once the driver does do it for one time, make sure you put it in memory function. Now, as my colleague Karan has kindly agreed to help us out with the shoot today, he's just going to change the memory function of the front passenger seat. And as you can see, it slides all the way to the front, making so much room for the rear passenger. I can now really stretch out and have a comfortable place and a comfortable experience in the back of the car. I also get these really nice cushions, which are a nice touch, but there is something that's still missing, and that is the recline functionality. The Mercedes E-Class gets it, the 5 Series does not. I spoke to BMW, why was this decision taken? They said in order to do that, they would have had to fit a motor, and that would mean lesser cushioning, and that's a choice they have actively made to give you a better cushioned seat here at the back. Last but not the least, let's talk about the way the car has been set up. And over here, the suspension setup, the chassis setup, everything is just on point. I barely get to know any undulations on the road, even if the car is doing triple digit speeds. Low speed stability is really nice. And I think this is where those smaller alloy wheels really come into play. Remember how we complained about that as well? Because they don't look as good as they could. The plus side to that is with the thicker tire walls, the bump absorption of the car is just so much better, and you can really feel it at the back over here. Now, everything's done. Let's answer the big question, if it is still a 5 Series that we know and love. And the way to find the answer to that question is quite simple, really. What if, say, I was in sports mode, I were to put the transmission in the sportier setting, maybe the traction controls all the way off, and say if I were to take a U-turn and by mistake I were to floor it, ladies and gentlemen, the 5 Series is pretty much how I remember it. Okay, let's calm ourselves down. Let's go back to a relaxed setting. Let me change my modes to efficient and let's have a conversation. The 5 Series comes with a 2-liter 4-cylinder engine, makes 258 horsepower, 400 Newton meters of torque, which very interestingly, by the way, peaks in as low as 1600 RPM, which is quite nice. Comes with an 8-speed automatic transmission, and the 48-volt motor, the mild hybrid system that it has, can add up to 11 horsepower and 25 Newton meters of torque when needed. That would specifically come in when you press this boost pedal, which is one of the paddle shifters, the one on the left, which says boost. So if you were to press it for long, it will give you 10 seconds of just a bit more torque and power to carry that acceleration. So it has got all the hardware that it needs. However, the big question is, how is the car to drive? Because that really has been the identity of the 5 Series all these decades. And in the new car, it's still there, thankfully, but I would say it's ever so slightly watered down this time. And I have a theory to that. You see, the steering wheel sensitivity, well, that gets altered as per the mode you're driving, but for my liking, this time around, it's just so much on the lighter side. That has an upside, which is if you're in the city, if you're going through traffic, even though the car has got bigger in size, you don't really feel that while driving. You can really take this however you want in any kind of driving situation. The light steering wheel really helps with that. But when the speeds build up, it does not weigh up as much as you would like, and as a result there is a bit of a disconnect over there. But remember, I'm coming from very high standards, and those standards were set by BMW 5 Series in the first place. So it's not as much as that, but there's no love lost. It's still a car that is fun to drive really quick. 0 to 100 kilometers an hour can happen in just 6.5 seconds or so. So this is not a slow car by any means of the imagination. Now let's talk about the drive setup. I asked BMW guys, have you made any changes for the India model? They said yes, as compared to the China model, the suspension setup and all has been tweaked with, and I have to say that really shows. The car is a lot bigger than before, but while being driven, while going through different road surfaces, or while you're managing through the city traffic, it really feels as if it has shrunk around you. It feels like a slightly larger 3 Series, to be honest, which also comes only in the long wheelbase version, remember, the Grand Limousine. So yes, it still feels like a properly sporty car. You know what the nose is doing. You know exactly when the rear is going to step out. You know when you're at the limit of the traction. This is a really fun car to drive. And on these 18-inch wheels, I've had no complaints even while going through poorly built patches of roads. Do keep that in mind when you're going for the 19-inch wheel options. It'll feel more sporty, but it might not be as comfortable. So to wrap it all up, well, I believe up until this point of the video, I've covered almost everything about the car in a fair bit of depth. So I'm going to keep the summing up short, but it is going to be in 2 parts. First, the car. Yes, it is still very much the 5 Series that we know and love, and it still maintains the spirit that has given it its own unique identity in this highly competitive segment. By that I mean, this is still a car that you wouldn't mind being driven in, and is still a car that you would love to drive on those weekends. Now moving on to the segment. As of now, by the time of shooting it, we don't know what the price of the car will be, but we expect it to be about 70 to 80 lakh rupees. Well, that is the default expectation. But the real competition in this segment begins when the new Mercedes E-Class comes to the Indian market, which too already comes in the long wheelbase, guys. The next generation E-Class has a lot going for itself and is expected to come to the market later this year. So we have the 2 titans of the segment getting refreshed. As for the 5 Series, how is it placed for the coming months? I would say BMW might have just nicked the title of being the best car in the segment. It's bigger, it's wider, it has a lot more road presence, the tech on board has gone up by miles, and the driving bit is still there. And above all, the comfort factor has gone up by so many levels. I think BMW might have actually done it this time.